Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, this is the Dark Side talking, and I welcome you once again to another groundbreaking episode of Series Squared. Today we're going to look at a book from the Discworld series, written by Terry Pratchett, Sir Terry Pratchett. This book series stays very, very close to my heart. It consists of over 35 books and has sold over 7 million copies. This book series is big. Is huge, it's amazing, although they still yet to create a proper adaptation of even one of the books. But that's beside the point. Let's begin. Terry Pratchett, born on the 28th of April 1948, is an English author of fantasy novels, and he's very well known for his comedic works. He usually makes something which is both quirky, yet also has a soul, something to inspire and grab the person's heart. Today we're going to look at the very first Discworld book called Color of Magic. But before that, we must ask ourselves, what is the Discworld? The Discworld series is Sir Terry Pratchett's main line of work. This is the giant book series he has worked on for decades now. It includes, as I have said before, dozens upon dozens of books, and almost every single book is able to be read by itself or as a part of this giant monster of a series. The main theme, what ties all these books together, is that it plays on the same universe, obviously. This universe is called the Discworld. The Discworld is, unsurprisingly, a disc. And this disc is held up by 4 elephants that stand on a giant turtle. Now this turtle is going through space, and for most of the books, he doesn't really matter. Just like Death, who actually appears in every single one of the books, the turtle is just a cosmic truth. That is what is below all the characters and events that happen on all the Discworld stories. Now, there are certain small arcs of characters over multiple books within this giant series. For example, one book series follows all the guards within the main city called Ankh-Morpork, and how they solve crimes, etc., etc. Whereas another book series instead looks after all the witches up in the hilltops whose books each reference another type of artistic creation. One, for example, makes a nice mockery of Shakespeare's work, while another has a crackling fun at fairy tales. All of these small strands create a bigger whole, but it is these small serials one must be looking for if one is interested in character progression. Now today, the very first book is a part of the Rincewind Chronicles, or so I call him right now. Rincewind is a wizard, but, as we will find out, not a particularly good one. This is his first adventure. Let us begin. Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, to Terry Pratchett's A Color of Magic. Now, most Terry Pratchett books do not have chapters or sections. However, this book is cut up into 4 parts. The Color of Magic, The Sending of 8, The Lure of the Worm, and Close to the Edge. Ready to begin? Excellent. Our story begins in The Color of Magic. This section introduces us to our main characters, Rincewind, the wizard, and Twoflower, the world's very first tourist. This world is, while comical, also rather dark, medieval, and quite tragic in its own hilarious way. Rincewind is a wizard, technically. He never actually succeeded in any of his tests, and he cannot utter a single spell. The only spell he even knows is one of the great 8 spells that once created the Discworld. He, by himself, is one of the world's greatest cowards. Twoflower, on the other hand, is a tourist. He comes from a continent far away from the one where most of the stories take place. He has come to look around, and he is of the firm belief that as long as he is mild-mannered and happy, no harm will come to him because he just simply isn't involved. He carries with him thousands upon thousands of gold pieces, which in his country mean hardly nothing. his clothes on his back, and a giant chest which walks on hundreds of tiny little legs and is going to be one of the greatest destructive forces ever in written literature. Promptly after arriving to Ankh-Morpork, the heart of the Discworld stories, the greatest city that there ever was, Twoflower acquires Rincewind as a translator and a tourist guide. Rincewind, seeing the enormous wealth and complete unprotection of Twoflower, accepts the job, takes the fee, and then runs away as fast as he possibly can. Sadly, he is stopped by the elite god of the patrician, Havelock Vetinari. Ah, the patrician. As the ruler of Ankh-Morpork, he believes in the one-man, one-vote system. He is the man, he has the vote. In a time of ancient gods, warlords, and kings, Vetinari has created a city that, on the whole, works. Well, fails to fall apart. He is also in the very loose contact with the Agitian Empire, the land where Twoflower is from, and it appears that the Emperor doesn't want to see Twoflower dead. And seeing as the Agitian Empire has enough firepower to wipe Ankh-Morpork off the face of the earth, Vetinari just cannot allow him to run around unprotected. Seeing as Rincewind brought a horse with false coinage, as Agitian coins are pure gold while Ankh-Morpork dollars have the same amount in them as, say, seawater, the patrician gives him a choice, either to honor the deal he made with Twoflower and be his tourist guide, or be imprisoned for forgery. Either way, the patrician is ready to give Rincewind still alive, if barely body, to the arriving angry Agitian armada should anything, untowards happen to Twoflower. Terrified beyond his wits, Rincewind decides to in fact stay with Twoflower. What happens after this is one catastrophe after another, all humorously created, all magnificently written, and so, at this point, I would like to ask anybody who wants to actually enjoy this book to stop here and read it on his own. After this, there will be proper spoilers. Understood? Great! Our journey then continues within Ankh-Morpork, where Twoflower has gotten into a bit of a trouble. You see, a small man with a giant box full of gold gets noticed, and Ankh-Morpork's thieves and murderers sort of revolved around the small man, ready to beat him into a bloody pulp, or at least murder him and steal all his possessions. A surprising amount of hijinks ensue, ending with Twoflower and Rincewind fleeing the city, and the said city, Ankh-Morpork, being burned to a crisp. And thus we reach the second section of our book, The Sending of Eight. You see, the Discworld has many gods, and these gods do enjoy to play the occasional game with the souls and lives of men. And one god in particular seems to be having quite a fun time wrecking everybody else's. Fate, who always has his way, except with one other god, or to be more precise, a goddess. Known only as the Green-Eyed Lady, they make a bet, a deal. And the Green-Eyed Lady sends forth her most prominent of champions, Rincewind. The story The Sending of Eight centers around Twoflower and Rincewind once again finding themselves within unbelievable terror. They are being drawn into the temple of Bel-Shamhameroth, the Sender of Eight, a creature who devours souls. As it should happen, in the end, they meet up with a barbarian hero known as Hran, and leave the temple breaking apart and in shambles. I think you can see a pattern starting to take shape here. The third book, The Lure of the Worm, is a rather straightforward affair. Hran, Twoflower, and Rincewind meet the place where the field of reality is thinner than everywhere else, where magic is so much more powerful, and where even thought itself gains strength. Here, a magical overlord has taken over, and his own children vie for control with dragons made out of pure thought. Their stronghold is an upside-down mountain called the Weinberg. That is where our story eventually leads, where we leave our hero Hran. Twoflower and Rincewind fly onwards with an imaginary dragon that eventually dissipates, and they fall into the ocean. The last section of the book, Close to the Edge, begins with the greatest fear of anyone who lives on a Discworld. Rincewind and Twoflower are about to fall off the edge. Thankfully, they are saved and held by the Circumfence, a giant system of pulleys and levers built by the nation of Krull. Krull is a country that lives almost over the edge, and they live upon all the spoils that the sea provides instead of tumbling down the rimfall into the eternal void of space. Rincewind and Twoflower are quickly taken. At first, they're afraid of being enslaved, but in the end it turns out they don't have to worry about that, as they will be summarily sacrificed. You see, it seems that Krull enjoys the art of astronomy, and they wish to find out the great question, the gender of the great turtle at Tuin, whose back the 4 turtles stand, whose back the Discworld rests upon. And they wish to create a craft that flings over the edge and gets to see the gender of the turtle firsthand. However, to make sure it goes successfully, they are going to give a sacrifice to a certain god, Fate. The very god who Rincewind and Twoflower had been pieces against in the cosmic game of gods. Let's just say that the ending of the book is a wonderful cliffhanger, one that should be, of course, experienced by all readers, and this is the first step, the first wonderful, amazing step into the Discworld series. I hope you have enjoyed our little time together, and that this little review has given you a hint or a taste of Discworld humor that no one can replicate. I should also mention at this point that almost every paraphrasing of the book is amazing. Almost every single small section of the book is built perfectly to match humor with occasional serious thoughts, and let us not forget that in every single book, this one included, Death himself appears. In fact, here Death seems to have a bit more maniacal nature than in all of the other books. He is out to get Rincewind, and Rincewind keeps running away from Death himself, refusing to die. And, as we shall see in future installations, this habit of Rincewind running away from Death will not end. Even though, spoilers, at the end of this book, Rincewind spirals off the edge of the world in a makeshift spacesuit, flinging over the turtle, falling down into the eternal vastness of space, into pure nothingness.
When it comes to rating one of Pratchett's works, I'm afraid I cannot be totally objective. However, I shall try my best. The Color of Magic is an excellent start to the series. However, there are certain comedic elements which are overplayed, and it's thus a detract from the score. I deem The Color of Magic a strong 7 out of 10. Add 1 if you're a Terry Pratchett fan, detract 1 if you do not like fantasy-based humor. As for its adaptation, it is the absolutely most vile one of all the Discworld adaptations. It deserves a 4 or a 3 out of 10, and I urge anyone who wants to watch it to seriously reconsider. To anybody who hasn't seen any Terry Pratchett books, they will simply be bored. To anybody who has, well, my condolences.
See you next time, folks.